I think there's not a lot between the two teams. I think home advantage is probably the buffer for France. What the I guess the unknowns is the psychological impact of defeats at the quarterfinal stage of a World Cup. Obviously, how harrowing and gutting it was from an Irish perspective. We've lived it, but from a French perspective, like a home World Cup, there was so much built up to a team of a generational team winning a home World Cup. A lot of the guys obviously haven't come through the 20 system and been successful in that regard. So it's going to be fascinating to see who hits the ground running. It's and obviously the unknowns in terms of Dupont and Sexton, how integral both players are to their teams, and how much their absences are going to be felt. So there's probably quite a few unknowns in terms of which side's going to rock up and hit the ground running. And it's such a momentum tournament as well that whoever loses really is on the back foot, and that World Cup hangover could potentially linger for a little bit longer. But I'd still be really confident from an Irish perspective, like lucky enough to be at that quarterfinal game. I said it at the time, it's probably one of the best games of rugby union I've ever witnessed in my life. And Ireland played a major role in that. And they weren't a million miles off. Like the small margins, obviously the Geordie Barrett hold up of that maul on the line, like that's millimeters from being Irish trying to probably go on and win the game. So there was absolutely nothing in it. And there was elements of Ireland's performance that they obviously would have unpacked in that opening camp week of the Six Nations. But there was a lot to like about what they did as well. So, and let's not forget that the only team that beat South Africa at the World Cup as well. So I think the players themselves will be hugely confident. And as I said, I think a 2-3 point margin is probably about right either way. But it will come down to obviously who can, as I said, hit the ground running and build that momentum early in the game.
If it is to be Jack Crowley and Jamison Gibson Park starting at halfback for Ireland, we probably don't have a great sample size of them as a partnership
No.
quite yet, and that'll be there will be a degree of uncertainty around that until we see it. But then you contrast that with France's expected starting halfbacks. The team will be named by the time this podcast comes out. You've got Maxime Lucu and Mathieu Jalibert, who've been absolute tearing sides asunder for Bordeaux, particularly in Europe. I'm curious as to how you would see France's attack changing, if at all, with those two guys in there. Basically, the Bordeaux halfbacks in place of the Toulouse halfbacks that have run the show until recently.
Yeah, to be honest, in the World Cup, I was so surprised how seamlessly Jalibert slotted in place of Ntamack. He is an exceptional rugby player. His ability to play at the line, his footwork, his speed. There's not too many flaws in his game, and I think he's continued where he left off at the World Cup for Bordeaux. Possibly there was chinks in the high pressure cauldron, obviously, of the game in South Africa, where there were a couple of errors from Jalibert, but I still think he's a phenomenal talent that France don't lose too much with the absence of Ntamack. On the other hand, the nine, it's just like how do you replace Dupont? You can't really. I think Lucu is an excellent player. I think obviously as the cohesion with Jalibert is really important. His support lines, his positive support lines. I just went back and watched a couple of the Bordeaux games exceptionally well. He reads the game similar to Dupont, I would say, in that regard. I don't think his service is as good as Dupont's, and he doesn't have the unbelievable X factor that Dupont has. So he won't generate things out of nothing the way Dupont does. I just don't think he has that ability. But I think within the framework, he'll be able to function at an exceptionally high level. The other one that I've been unbelievably impressed with throughout the Champions Cup is the Racing line.
Anthony Legaric.
Oh my God, he could be the next Dupont as well. Like his highlights reel is something special, isn't it? Like he seems to have the full array of tricks, offload ability, speed, good defensively, gets into that jackal position. There's a couple of attacking kicks. I think he played for the Barbas against England last year. They're just phenomenally good. Like he's an exceptional footballer. So it's not as if there's a lack of talent coming through in that position for France. It's just I just don't think he can replace the best player in the world that easily.
Can you foresee a situation in which Nolan Le Garrec becomes the starting scrum half, and maybe as much as Luku is a good player, his selection as starter at the moment is probably predicated upon that fluidity and relationship with Charlie Baird? Like, is Le Garrec he's only 21, but could he just overtake him by the end of this tournament?
Yeah, possibly. I think even with the players that have been brought into the squad, obviously the not so small Tuilagi brother coming in replace for Manny Miafau as well. So I think there potentially is one eye on the future as well. Like Grach was obviously the 20s team, I believe, that won the World Cup. So really good pedigree there. So absolutely building cohesions, particularly at halfback, is so important. As you've rightly mentioned, Gav, the Gibson Park Crowley one is rightly untested at this point in time. So it is important to build cohesion, but I think such as the talent of Le Grach, I'd be surprised if he doesn't get minutes in this championship.